I said in my initial assessment of the Arnold, Nick was closer to third or fourth than he was to first.
What's up, Desktopers? Xavier Wills here for Desktop Bodybuilding, and we are back with another video, and we're here today discussing Bob Cicherillo, his thoughts on who's going to win the 2023 Mr. Olympia. Not just his thoughts, his bold prediction really, plus also where should Nick have placed at the 2023 Arnold Classic? Was he closer to winning the contest? Bob Cicherillo doesn't think so. He reckons he was closer to potentially placing a little bit lower. We've got all that for you guys coming up in this one. I'm going to play some of the comments from Bob Cicherillo on his channel, Voice of Bodybuilding, as well. Actually, no, that's not on his channel, but he does have his channel pumping at the moment. This is actually on Mr. Olympia TV with Tarek El-Gindi. Also, who else was on there? Flex Wheeler, and we had Milos Sarchev as well. So I'm going to play a bit of that for you guys, and you can give me your opinion on Bob Cicherillo's comments. Plus, we're going to be joined by Bob Cicherillo as well during this. I'm going to send him the link right now so he can join in. And give it, basically I can ask him a few questions as well, and he can give his opinion, and I can basically ask the questions that you guys want answered. So if you have questions for Bob Cicherillo in this video, ask him in the comments now, and I'll try to get to those before this video wraps up. But let's get into the comments from Bob Cicherillo and what he had to say on the most recent episode of Mr. Olympia TV.
Nick, close. Tributes of a great champion, and I agree with Milos in that this wasn't close. This is why I said in my initial assessment of the Arnold, Nick was closer to third or fourth than he was to first. You can take that to the bank, because if Andrew Jack just held his conditioning into Saturday night and didn't fade out, he would have been second place, in my opinion. So Samson has a great future ahead of him, and the key to his future, or whether he wins the Olympia or not this year or whatever, is solely going to lie in the idea that his conditioning has to be on par with that great physique on game day. If it isn't, and listen, we have an example right in front of us, right? He didn't nail it at the Olympia this year. That's why he was sixth. If he nails it this year and he's 5% better than what we just saw, you're looking at your next Mr. Olympia.
Who's going to win the Mr. Olympia? And Bob made a pick that nobody was picking. He picked Hadi to win the Olympia. And Bob is already cocky. He's already an arrogant guy. And, you know, I knew when Hadi
You can see how much Milos loves that. He found that hilarious. But obviously Milos and Bob have gone back and forth over the posing, and they debate that, which is all sort of pretty much in good fun. But yeah, that was definitely interesting. But the fact that Bob has, you know, has Nick closer to third or fourth, we'll go over some of that video, than actually winning the contest. Because obviously there's the Nick Walker fans out there that you know, dead set on Nick Walker winning this contest over Samson Dauda. So for these comments, I'm sure this is going to rile up the Nick Walker fans. But you guys, let me know what you think in the comments below.
won that show, that we would have to endure Bob for the next 20 years. Yeah. Now, Bob, all credit to you. You are the Bob Stradamus. You got it right. But the moment has come for you to look at the camera with no fear in your heart and say, who is going to win the 2023 Mr. Olympia?
Let me look into my my bowl of soup, like Nostradamus used to do. Stare into it and then see the future.
So credit to Bob, because not many people actually had Hadi winning the Olympia last year, and he predicted that, I think, a long way out. So shout out.
Sure, unfold. This is how I get this stuff, guys. Look at it. It's right here. Look at it. You can see it. It's unfolding. It's unfolding. It's unfolding. Your next Mr. Olympia, the next name you hear will be your new Mr. Olympia. And that man is Samson Dauda.
I would not bet against that.
All right.
From your mouth to the God's ears.
So Milos obviously loves that, because that's his guy, Samson Dauda. And, you know, it's a distinct possibility if he continues to make those same sort of improvements year to year. Now, let's look at this. We've got some of these poses side by side. So let's go back to this and see this sort of comparison, because this is when they first walked out at prejudging. And Nick Trigili has made some comments as well about basically that Samson was his best when he first walked out at prejudging. Now, Samson to me, was his best at finals. Personally, that's just what I thought. But when he first walked out at prejudging, I'll agree with Nick Cicherillo, he was definitely very, very good at that point. So this is when he first walked out and when Nick Walker first walked out too. I'd say Nick Walker was slightly better for the finals than he was at prejudging, but I'd say Samson was a little bit better than this even as well. But Samson dramatically faded as that prejudging wore on. And if the Olympia is sort of, I suppose, the way it was last year in terms of being delayed and not as organised, I'm sure they're going to fix that up. But if it's sort of like that for next year, then I think that's going to spell trouble for Samson Dauda. So we'll have to see how organised the Olympia is in terms of the timing and all that sort of stuff. But I think that definitely could hurt Samson Dauda if they do that. But when you look at the physiques, I mean, obviously Samson's just coming out of that now, but Nick obviously looks fantastic in that front double. But when they stand side by side, I think it really sort of does show up. And this lineup was literally Nick Walker's worst nightmare because he was up against a whole bunch of guys. And I think the reason for the criticism of his legs would not so much that they even flattened out that much, really. When I actually look at photos and video comparisons, they look pretty comparable and pretty much the same. But the fact was more that he was standing with three other guys that have phenomenal quads. Samson Dauda, Andrew Jacked, and also Big Ramy, whose quads were ridiculous. So in the lineup, plus he was dramatically shorter than, well, he's shorter than all those guys, but dramatically shorter than Samson and Andrew Jacked as well. Plus they're super aesthetic. So it was almost like it was a perfect combination for Nick Walker to lose this contest. Now, if it was a Mr. Olympia lineup, would this show have actually placed out different? Because bodybuilding is all about comparisons. And Nick does not compare as well between a whole bunch of 6 foot plus guys with phenomenal quads. While his quads, when you really look at them, my head's covering a little bit of them there on the screen, but they're actually not bad. Like, they're not terrible, but they're not Samson Dauda's either. In terms of the fullness, you see how much more muscle is on there. Plus, Samson is super aesthetic. But if Nick Walker, I think he just needs to change a few things with his posing. If he can come in a bit fuller. Now, what worries me about Nick Walker is what he's saying in terms of what he's going to bring to the stage, because I get concerned, I guess, that he's going to bring a package that is now just super full and sacrifices a little bit of conditioning, which I don't think is a good idea for Nick Walker. I think Nick Walker needs to bring his all-time best in terms of the overall package, the conditioning, the fullness, everything. And I get worried when guys say, I'm going for Munzer conditioning or next level conditioning. Basically, Andreas Munzer was a pro from back in, I suppose competed back in the early 2000s, it would have been, I guess, maybe 90s. And he was known for bringing absolutely outrageous conditioning, and they found, apparently found his cycle and it was absolutely insane. But people chase that sort of level of conditioning. It's just not on the cards for some people. That's not some people's best package. Like, some guys need to, come down to a certain level, and if they start to push past that for that, extra couple of percent conditioning, they might lose 15% of fullness. Now, I don't think Nick lost so much fullness that it was a bad package for him. Obviously, he placed second at the Arnold. It's a huge show, and Samson now is a legit Olympia contender, as is Nick. Because if you did have that close, then Nick Walker is obviously still a contender. But I think the fact that Samson's making these huge improvements, he has a huge frame as well. And people see Nick as being somewhat limited, but Nick's now training legs twice per week, as mentioned on my last show. And I mean, if he can fill out those legs a little bit more and then bring that fullness, it might make a huge difference. But we've got Bob Cicherillo here, who I'm going to add to the stream right now. What's up, Bob Cicherillo?
Yo, what's up?
How you doing? Obviously, for those who don't know, and most people obviously would, you're the Mr. Olympia MC. You MC the Arnold Classic now as well. You're obviously a former pro bodybuilder. I suppose once a pro bodybuilder, always a pro bodybuilder, because you can always put in for that pro card if you really wanted to. But Bob, I just mentioned you obviously on this video just before. You got some bold predictions for the Olympia. That prediction of Samson Dauda winning, that's not going to be most people's prediction going into the Olympia this year. So what's the reason, I suppose, for putting Samson over guys like Hadi and guys like, obviously, Derek Lunsford, who looks phenomenal and is improving? So why Samson Dauda?
Well, listen, I predicted Hadi to win last year, and not many people had him winning. So
yeah, nailed it.
we can go with that track record. But on to this year's predictions. Samson, to me, is an easy pick. He has a better physique overall. His structure, symmetry, proportions, shape, all superior to everybody else that he's standing on stage with right now. Sixth place finish at the Olympia was only because he didn't have the conditioning. If he did, listen, he might have tasted victory this year, or at least been in the top 3, but you have to have that conditioning to match everything else that you got going on stage. All those attributes are great, but if you're too soft, then you're out of the running. And he finally fixed that at the Arnold, and you see what it resulted in, which was a victory, and I thought a convincing victory. And so it's no disrespect to anybody else, but he has all the tools to be Mr. Olympia. If he improves 5%, as I said on Olympia TV, you're looking at your next Mr. Olympia.
And I agree with that too. And we know, I suppose, from a track record, how much of a freak Samson Dauda is. He just seems to just add muscle and just continue to improve without blowing out his physique as well, which he's very aware of, I guess you'd say.
Yep.
But obviously mentioning, you think that Samson will win and what he looked like at the Olympia, placing 6th and when he's a little bit off. Now, with that Mr. Olympia as well, they were trying to bring a fuller look. But do you think the timing of the Olympia, a guy like Samson, like when he came out at prejudging, he looked phenomenal, faded through prejudging, came back at finals and looked really good. His physique varies a lot, and it's very, I suppose you'd say, temperamental in a way. But do you think because the Olympia was obviously went over a little bit and guys were sort of, behind on meals and things like that, do you think that would have affected Samson Dauda more at the Olympia and then someone else maybe?
Well, hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of factors, a lot of variables that come into play, including his association with Milos. Milos is literally just learning his physique. And as Milos has said, there's a lot of things Samson hasn't been doing that possibly he could be doing in terms of preparation, in terms of whatever he's using, that type of thing. So he's kind of in his infancy, really, as it would be, to what really we haven't seen the best Samson yet. And I think the best might be coming. I mean, listen, he's got to have a lot of confidence after winning the Arnold. He now knows what it takes to get in that kind of condition and that kind of shape. Maybe previously he never hit that before. Now he does know. And again, he's still got to get a little bit better. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. He beat a very impressive lineup, but this was not the Olympia either. And he's got a couple other guys that he's got to hurdle over in order to get into that top spot. So I think if he puts that all together, and again, I have said, just as I predicted for the Arnold, he had to be sharper to win the Arnold, or I was picking Nick Walker because Nick Walker is consistent. He may not be the most gifted person when it comes to genetics, but he comes in shape and he comes to play. And that's difficult to beat when somebody who's genetically superior is standing next to you, but they don't have that same level of conditioning. And in that case, the judges have to make a judgment call. That's why they're in the position that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick Walker strikes me as sort of one of those guys now that he's almost like a Branch Warren, Dexter Jackson. And if it seems like to me, his career might be one of those ones where he's right up there. And then if there's a few guys that come off, if it's a slightly down year for the Olympia in terms of the top guys, he might sneak in there and get 1, 2, 3 Olympia titles. You never know. Do you see that in the future for Nick?
I think that's a very astute assumption on your part. I think that's a good analogy. I put the analogy out the other day for all those people. I don't believe me. I've gotten tons of hate mail from Big Rami's fans, from Nick's fans, everybody who lost. I haven't got one complaint from Samson people. But I gave the analogy, which I think really closes the door on this argument. Of all those years that Lee Haney was battling Richie Gasperi, did anybody ever have Rich Gasperi winning? And the answer is no. Now, Rich Gasperi and Nick Walker are very comparable in that they're both shorter than and again, we're using Samson as an analogy to Lee Haney. Nick is shorter, stockier, muscular, ripped up, conditioned, right? Richie had lines in his glutes before anybody ever did. He was grainy, he was veiny. He had all those things. He was way more conditioned than Lee Haney. But Lee Haney was superior in every other way. And again, at the end of the day, I don't think anybody's ever said, I had Rich over Lee Haney. That's what you've got today. So your assumption is exactly correct. Nick's going to have a tougher battle. He is completely dependent on how good these other guys come in. Guys that are taller, broader, have better X-frame, better shape, better proportion. It's all going to hold in their hands. If Samson comes in on, Nick can't beat him. If he comes in off, of course, it's always subject to getting beaten. That's where guys like Rich Gasperi, that's where guys that were perennial runner-ups could get in there. Dexter obviously doesn't have that same situation as that. He wasn't built blocky or anything like that. He just wasn't as good as Jay overall, but Jay came in off. Dexter came in on, and he was awarded with the Olympia title in 2008.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, someone's saying here, and I saw someone else say it. This is from Michael Devore. He says Samson won every pose is lunacy, and someone said that you said that he won every pose. So is that true or not?
Well, what I said is for people that were picking poses, okay, you got to learn how the judging system works. When you say winning the pose, okay, what I said was in a counter response to what somebody else said was that then, listen, if you're behind the 8 ball from the beginning, okay, right off the bat, the symmetry round, there's a reason it's first. Symmetry, proportion, shape, structure, all those things are considered when the guys first go out there and they start doing their quarter turns. That's what the judges are really assessing at that point. Nobody in their right mind would have Nick ahead of Samson at that point because he loses on all those attributes. I think anybody who's got an eye for bodybuilding would agree on that. He's not winning a symmetry round. He's not more proportional than Samson, so on and so forth. So my point was, as you're assessing the physique, the front double bicep pose is not just about arms. It's not about your biceps. It's the judges are looking at your physique in its entirety in the front double bicep position. Now, just using that pose as an example, Nick has already got an uphill battle because he's not proportional. His upper body, he's a little long-waisted, a little short-legged. His upper body overwhelms his legs, which are actually down a little bit more than they were at the Olympia here. Like this pose that you're seeing right now on the screen. Perfect example. Now, if you can freeze that right there, this isn't close, okay? Samson wins this all day long and on Tuesday. This is just, now you're assessing it in the front lat spread, the side chest, the back double bi, the side tri, front abdominal. All the mandatory poses, you're assessing the entire physique in those positions. So that was, I was trying to make a point by saying, well, you could make a case that because Samson has better structure and all that stuff, then how does Nick win any poses, right? If your structure's off, it's off. I mean, there's no getting around it. But as people like to match up pose for pose, listen, you can do that too, but it's not really how the judging works.
Yeah, and this is sort of was sort of demonstrated a little bit last year. So, and we went pose for pose on Bodybuilding University, and Martin Fitzwater obviously competed against Andrew Jack at that Texas Pro. And at that show, it was like we broke it down pose for pose, and we were like, well, the back shots Martin wins, but the front double and the two front shots, Andrew Jack dominated, and he probably dominated by enough. Those other poses, that even though Martin technically maybe won more poses, but Andrew Jack was still the rightful winner.
Well, this reminds me of, now this is way before your days, but when I was a young man competing in my teenage years and such, they used to give body part trophies out, believe it or not. So there would be awards.
It happened in Australia. It happened in Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about, right? Best chest, best back, best arms, right? Everything had a trophy attached to it, right? I remember shows where a guy won every single body part trophy, but lost the competition. And it was for a good reason. He wasn't really put together very well. The guy that beat him had a beautiful physique, but the guy that won every body part just didn't match up. It was like a puzzle that didn't quite, it didn't elicit a really good physique at the end of the day. So I don't care how many poses you want to allot somebody. I mean, again, if I'm looking overall, I'm looking at shape, structure, all that back double bi right there. Listen, that's a great pose for Nick. But again, if I'm looking at it objectively, well, I could make a case for Samson because he's got better structure, shape, proportion, symmetry, and he's in condition enough. All right. That again, that's why I make that Lee Haney, analogy and comparison. Listen, I'm sure there was poses that Rich Gasperi was probably better, and like the overhead abdominal pose. That was a great pose for Richie. Most muscular. Again, take your pick. Lee beat him in the other poses, but you have to look at things overall when you're trying to assess who's the winner of a competition.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you this as well, because someone asked, RJ says, Bob, what do you make of Cicherillo wanting to revive the early 80s score system in bodybuilding?
Yeah, Nick's a funny guy. I really enjoy Nick's stuff because he's just, I used to think he was doing it on purpose, but I really just don't think he really knows any better. Let me tell you something. The early system of the 80s, they got rid of. Okay, they used to have a rounds system in which you had points allotted, and this changed a few times over history. I've explained this in some of my Voice of Bodybuilding podcasts. They used to have a point system. The reason the point system was put in was because Ben Weider, God bless him, was trying to get us into the Olympics. They were trying to get Olympic recognition, and he worked his whole life. God bless Ben Weider for that. To no avail. I mean, at the end of the day, it was probably never going to happen. But they had to have a scoring process that matched other scoring processes of the Olympics. The problem with bodybuilding is We don't have any required elements. This isn't like gymnastics or ice skating or competitive high diving where you have required elements. You got to do a triple toe on the ice, like let's say if you're an ice skater, right? Okay, so you actually A, have to complete the move, and then B, there's style points to it. Did you do it clean? Was it good looking? Did you barely make it? You almost fell on your ass. All right, and that's why you get 2 scores in something like ice skating. It can't be a required element in bodybuilding that you merely put your arms up in a front double bicep position. That's not really an athletic event, okay? It's just you putting yourself in a position. Now, we all know it's difficult to hit poses and hitting every muscle and all that. Listen, this is not an athletic thing, okay? So therefore, it was difficult, and that's why we ultimately never got accepted, because it's purely based on somebody's opinion as to something you're looking at. That's why we're part art and we're part sport. We are a true hybrid. We're not really a sport. We're actually closer to a pageant if you really want to look at things like that. But that's why the scoring, they got rid of it. They hated it because it was on a 10-point system. Then they had this other system they put in. Danny Padilla lost the 1978 Night of the Champions to Robbie Robinson, scoring a perfect 300. Okay, 300 was the best you could possibly get at that point for the scoring system that they had, which gave you points for symmetry, proportion, muscularity, posing, all that stuff, right? He scored 300 and lost the competition. Now, people say, well, how can that possibly happen? Because when it came to the pose down, they felt Robbie was better. So he remains the only guy to this day to score a perfect 300 and lose the competition. But what does that tell you about the scoring system back then? And not to belabor it, but even into the 90s, even into the time where I came into play in the 2000s, they were using a system that went to the placement score, okay, which basically means whatever place they think they have you in is your score. You're in 5th, you get a 5. You're 2nd, you get a 2. Okay, and so on and so forth. I've explained this 100 times to everybody so they can figure out how exactly they get to these, which, by the way, Nick is still wrong with everything he comes up with because he has no idea how many judges there were. So there was 11 judges, not 7. And then they threw out 3 highs and 3 lows, okay, to ensure integrity of the process. This way nobody can screw anybody, as we all hear these stories. But
and that's probably why as well that it looks like the judging is very much like pretty much everyone gets straight first and everyone gets straight second, right. Straight. It wasn't quite like that. It was a little bit, a few points here and there. But obviously, if you're throwing out,
and this is also why I said they keep insisting that wrongly that Samson was won unanimously across the board. Listen, I don't have the scores, but I talked to judges. Every one of those top three guys had first place votes. Now, some of them are going to get thrown out, obviously. Highs and lows are going to get thrown out. If a guy had him in 4th, that's going to get tossed. If a guy had him in 1st, that's going to get tossed. So what you end up with is exactly what you said. It's a mean average of the scoring process. And we do that for obvious reasons. And this eliminates the old, this judge didn't like this guy, or this guy was from Egypt, so of course he put Rami in 1st. Listen, you can do that, but your score is probably going to get thrown out. Yeah. So this is why we went to the placement system, though. It's the easiest process that you can possibly get on a sport, call it what you will, okay? That's completely dependent on your opinion as to what you like. And listen, everybody's got their own opinion, right? Some people like the taller guys. Some people say, well, I like the muscularity and the conditioning. I think that should be number 1. That's why you have 11 judges. But no, we don't need to go back to a system that didn't work to begin with. Everybody thought they were getting scored on the posing years ago, like when I came into play. Nobody ever got scored on a posing routine. Is there any way, shape, or form Dorian Yates beat Sean Ray in a posing routine? Come on.
And obviously, I've seen your arguments with Mila Sarchev back and forth about what should be judged, what shouldn't be judged, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm going to say, I do agree with what Mila says.
Who didn't complain once about the scoring at this show? Milos.
Well, obviously makes sense in prepping Samson Dauda, but yeah, I'll say one thing about the posing. I'm actually a big fan of introducing something to bring back, quality posing in terms of routines and stuff to the open. Money. Yeah. Well, do you think we should do, because the one thing that I've noticed with the Arnold, because they obviously give out a best poser, which seems to motivate 3 guys at the top to do a better routine. It doesn't motivate, because there's a bunch of guys, like there's going to be, an Ian Valier that's going to go in there and go, it's not going to change anything for me. you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I wouldn't mind it if it was judged, even if it was a tiny bit of a score where it's like, it could make a difference in placings in
Can't
terms
do it.
of, can't do it?
No, you
Why?
can't do it because, and I've used these analogies forever. How do you compare 50 Cent to Frank Sinatra?
Yeah.
Who's better? And people go, well, wait a minute, you can't compare these. They're completely right. So if a guy goes out there, he does a Lee Labrada type routine, right? A beautiful posing routine, right? Classic, a Muhammad Makawe style, right? And you go, man, that's beauty. That's art, man. That's bodybuilding, right? And then Vince Taylor comes out and he rocks the house with a Terminator style routine that's completely different. How do you score these two things? Now, what are we scoring, first of all? Are we scoring the body? Are we scoring the music, the entertainment value, the posing routine? You can see already where this is a problem because what are you basing it on? If it's just another physique round, and this is my argument to Milos, because we like to have fun debating this. If it's literally just another physique round, Milos himself says, no, Bob, or I'll do it in my Milos like that. It is not about the posing song or the posing routine. It's about the body. Okay. If it's just another physique round, we already have enough physique rounds. I don't need 52 physique rounds to figure out who's the best bodybuilder. I had the winner picked in about 5 minutes. Is they went out there, did their thing, got compared, and when they got next to each other, again, anybody who's got any bodybuilding eyes, okay, everybody pretty much had the top three in some order. Rami was immediately out of the mix in my book, just too big. Again, shape has gotten out of control, all those things we've already talked about. Everybody, 90% of the people have the top three in some order.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the counter argument to that, obviously Milos's argument in a way, and maybe from a slightly different perspective, is his argument is obviously it's not about the routine and how entertaining it is and if you're pop locking or whatever, but it's more about how you display the physique in that, and there's different poses you can do in there and more artistic stuff and how you judge that. And I like the idea of that. And I even like the idea of, like, if two guys are close and they're like, the judge is like, well, this routine was more graceful, more entertaining, and then just giving them the slight edge. But if it was judged some way, I know it's actually hard with the scores, but to make it so it's 10% of a score, 5% of a score, where it might split.
It does come into play. It does come into play because, as I've explained to Milos, even though you don't receive a specific score for something, doesn't mean the judges aren't judging. So my counter argument is no, you are being judged on it. They can use that in their assessment, of course, right? Just like when you come out and you start the show with quarter terms, symmetry, proportion, shape, structure, right? All those things. Now, you don't get a concrete score for that because there's 100 things that are involved. You can't have symmetry without shape. Can't have shape without proportion. Can't have proportion without symmetry, right? And so on and so forth. They all kind of have to combine into one round, and that's what the judges are assessing when the guys come out and do that. Now, just because you don't get a score for that doesn't mean you aren't being judged. Every trainer on this earth teaches their people. Correct me if I'm wrong on this one, okay? From the second you walk on stage, you're being judged. You've heard this, right? Even if you're in the back, even if you're on the side, don't let your stomach go, right? Keep it tight. They're always looking, right? They're always looking. This is all the things we hear from the trainers. If that's the idea, then you are always being judged, okay? When you get next to each other, that's the real competition because everybody looks good on their own. Let's face it. You and I have been to shows. I'll guarantee that. Some guy came out and you went, holy crap. Man, look at this guy. He's going to win the show, right? Yeah. And then he gets next to somebody. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? He looked really good when he first came up, but now that he's standing next to this guy, it's a little, things are a little different. Bodybuilding and the art of scoring it is all about comparison. What does you have to beat somebody, right? You got to look better than the other guy. That's the whole sport. That's the whole competition.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mr. Max66 says, this is a little bit off topic, but he says, Nick fans have to realize just because he's popular doesn't mean every show is one with peeled to the bone conditioning and crazy hamstrings. And he says, shake your head.
Listen, Nick is a tremendous bodybuilder. I mean, he takes a lot of flack but he does have some intense fans, and I can appreciate that. Listen, I love the bodybuilding fans. That's what keeps our sport going, right? But yes, just because he's in we've had lots of guys that were in stellar conditioning over the years, but they weren't put together that great. Now, sometimes that can benefit you. Listen, this guy just won the Arnold a couple of years ago. Now, the lineup wasn't the toughest I've ever seen, but that's not Nick's fault. He's only there to compete against whoever else shows up. Good for him. Congratulations. He earned every bit of that. But there are guys that are structurally better that are now starting to come up into the ranks. And as I've said, and it's something against Nick, but Nick's fate is going to lie in those guys' hands. I gave a hypothetical the other day on Olympia TV, I think, to the other boys. If hypothetically everybody showed up at 100% at the Olympia, let's say this year, everybody just nailed it, knocked it out of the park, best you've ever seen him, right? Who wins?
Probably Samson.
Right?
Or
I asked you that. No, it's an honest answer, right? Because you just thought in your head real quick, you thought, well, he's got the structure to shape, he's tall, he's wide, he's huge, right? He's 300 pounds of muscle on stage. You automatically, your bodybuilding brain just kicked on and you said, who has the best physique?
Yeah.
Now, Hadi is great, right? But he's shorter and compact and doesn't have the structure, right? Same thing with Nick. Derek Lunsford is a close second. And that's why I said in my predictions, he might be number 2 again to Samson, or he could win the thing, depending on which one of those guys nails their conditioning. But Derek, after Samson, has the best structure out of all those guys. Then you're going to get into guys like Andrew Jack, perhaps a Regan Grimes, if he should get himself back on stage and find himself. Listen, Regan lines up very well with these guys. Big guy, 6 foot plus, put together, wide shoulders, small. He's got all the attributes. He just had to thicken up more, and he just took this last year off to do so. He brings the conditioning. You can't write him off either. So you've got some good talent up there, but the road's going to get, listen, every sport goes in ups and downs, right? Baseball, football, I don't care what it is. You get better years than others with competition or teams or that type of thing. Bodybuilding now is kind of on the upswing, right? You're starting to see
absolutely
a better crop of physiques, almost like back in the 90s, right? When you saw the emergence of Flex Wheeler, Sean Ray, Kevin Lavroni, Chris Cormier, right? You had your Dexter Jackson. Look at these names I'm throwing out, and you go, wow, all those guys are structurally superior. And then you had a guy like a Branch Warren, right? Even a Jay Cutler. Jay had said himself, he wasn't the most structurally gifted, but he was able to work hard, make the improvements and all that stuff, and he got himself 4 Sandals. So, the game's never over, but you definitely have a tougher road to hoe if you don't have that symmetry, proportion, and shape.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, and I don't know what the reason is for this. I don't know if it's because men's physique and classic physique and maybe 212 are feeding the open a bit, and people are, obviously we've seen people transition up to the open from these other classes. You got, Stanimal Stan Delonge, he turned pro in men's physique, then he went to classic, and then he goes to open. So it's like, and he's, was 1 spot away from qualifying for last year's Olympia. So, but the talent, it seems like, maybe not at the very, very top, but the talent that goes down the lineup now just seems so much deeper, because we saw, was it last year, the year before, Samson and Nathan Diasha, Samson wins a show and was 4th in one of them. Then Nathan wins a show and comes 4th in the other one. And it's like, the fact that these guys are switching around so much and they're all Olympia standard is pretty crazy to me. And it just goes so deep.
Well, again, with all due respect to Nathan, Samson has a better physique and had a better physique then, but he didn't come in the shape he needed to come in, and Nathan did, and that's why Nathan won. Nathan is a good bodybuilder in his own right, but right now there's no comparison there. But you're right. I mean, we are seeing a resurgence, so to say, of some more symmetrical physiques, more return more to the old school type physiques, and that's just something that happens. I mean, again, every sport goes through the same process of better versus not. Well, they were better in the 90s. Well, they were better in the 80s. Listen, you can make a case for a lot of that kind of stuff. It just goes in ebbs and flows. That's just the way things work out. I think it's a great thing for the sport right now. And this is also, to your point, why we have all these different categories. Like, I've heard some recent rumblings of, we need to get rid of the 212. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's like the 212, it was put in place to give those guys an equal platform to compete on. You know how hard it is to give up 100 pounds of muscle? And this is what I said the other day. I got to take my hat off to Sean Clarita for giving up 120 pounds. Think about that, people.
It's insane.
It's a whole nother person, right?
I think it was
these
125 to Rami, and he was being compared.
Right? 125 pounds, and still, listen, some people had him ahead of Rami at the show, right? That's how good that he is. But make no mistake, listen, with all due respect, right? He plays. So Rami was what, fourth? Clarita was fifth, if I'm not mistaken, at the Arnold. Is that right?
So who was that? Sorry.
So Rami was fourth, correct? Clarita was fifth, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Now, stellar finish, fantastic. Kudos to him, right? But Hadi Chupan wasn't in there. Derek Lunsford wasn't in there. And Brandon Curry wasn't in there. So that's three guys that Sean Clarita probably would have not beaten, all things considered, of course. We're always speculating. But so all of a sudden, his fifth is a ninth, right? Now, again, all things in perspective. What does that tell us? Well, size does matter when it comes to open bodybuilding. It's very difficult, even as great as Sean Clarita is, to crack that type of competition. Again, hypothetically, those three guys are in there. He's ninth place. Nice. Not exactly what he's looking for, though.
Yeah.
Stay
and
in
you've
the
also got
212.
guys like Michael Crizzo, Ian Valier, all those guys that are, crazy.
We haven't even brought up some of those names yet. Like the two you just mentioned, like Akeem, right? Listen, Akeem ain't too far off either. He's got more muscle than anybody. You just got to find a way to, fine tune it. But Ian Valier is an excellent guy. He's won his fair share of shows. Then you got guys like Brett Wilkin who are on the horizon, and some of the up and comers.
He's looking very good. Right, I got to see Brett out in Australia. And from where he was at in terms of his off season and stuff, he's like, when I get back to the US, I'm growing, and he's doing that right now. And there's a photo with him and James Hollingshead and Hunter Labrada, actually all looking ridiculous right now.
Hunter Labrada, James Hollingshead. I mean, as we talk, right, the names, they continue to pop by. Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, that's right. Oh, what about him, right? So.
Yeah, it's crazy. But Bob, I want to thank you so much for coming on here, but give it a bit of a shout out to your sponsors and also your podcast, what you're doing now, because I really like the content that you're putting out. I've seen the ones the last few days that you've done, and hope to see more of it. Yeah,
no, I appreciate that. Well, my two top sponsors are Redcon One and Aaron Singerman, his whole crew really helping out. And my good friends at Panada, I was actually able to go out there to Italy to see the whole entire factory and production. Really an amazing company, but if anybody wants some world-class gym equipment, this stuff is head and tails above the rest. But I appreciate, of course, all my sponsors, and there's more coming. But the podcast has taken off. I think it's a refreshing change from, everybody's got the scuttlebutt and the behind the scenes and all the arguing and the coaches and who did what to who and all that. I can't get into that stuff. That's really just not my thing. I'm going to stick more with the nuts and bolts. I like to educate people. I've got a lot of years in the sport, even though the conspiracy theorists still like to. Any conspiracy theories you need cleaned up here while I'm here or anything? Or
conspiracy theories. Oh, I'm sure there's plenty about corruption and all that.
What do you want to know, bro? Did Rami get spanked because he didn't go to Jim's Pittsburgh show and guest pose? No.
Well, that's one that's going around, definitely.
Right? This is how stupid and ludicrous that is. The Arnold is an invitational. They don't have to invite Rami. If Jim had it out for Rami, why wouldn't he just not invite him to the show? Right?
Yeah.
Why do you bother? So you actually let him in the show, to potentially win it as a punishment? I mean, think how weird this is, right? When I hear stuff like this, it's so funny to me that I see things like this being perpetuated. It's like, oh, the powers that be, they're keeping them at. They wouldn't even let him in the show. It's like Kai Green years ago. Oh, they're never going to let him win because of all his past and his messing around with fruits and stuff and all that weird stuff he was doing, right? But you give him second place in the Olympia? You let him win Arnold's? That's okay? Listen, if you want to screw a guy, put him in
he won that Arnold against Phil Heath, which I disagree with. I can't remember what year it was,
too.
But yeah. So it's like it's like you wouldn't be giving people gifts in shows if it's even close. If that was happening,
let me assure everybody that there's no round table that comes to be that all these things are discussed. Like people are fortune tellers and they know who's going to show up in what shape. Like there was some agenda to put. How would anybody know if Samson shows up in shape? If he shows up in the same shape as the Olympia, guess what? He doesn't win this. He's in third, right? I mean, and Nick probably would have won again. So. There's no way to tell what these guys are going to do, but trust me, folks, there is no brain trust that sits around thinking, you know what? I think we need to go in a different direction. What do you think, Jim? And he goes, yeah, I think you're right. You know, what direction do you think we should go? We're always looking for the same direction they've been looking for from 1965. It hasn't changed. You know what has changed? The players.
Yeah.
That's what changes. The player. We're looking for the best bodybuilder in the world overall. Overall is your key word here, people. Best shape, best proportion, muscularity, conditioning, all those factors, presentation, they all get factored in, and we're looking to reward the best person. We always use the guys, but man or female, depending whatever division you're in, that best fits the criteria for what they're looking for. Sometimes it doesn't exist on stage. Everybody thinks the golden ticket's always there. Look, we've all been to shows that the guy who got rewarded was the best guy that was there. I mean, it didn't, when we first started, like, whatever, pick a division, women's physique or whatever, and one girl won, oh, that's what they're looking for. Well, listen, not necessarily. That's what was the best on that stage, but sometimes what you're looking for isn't there. Anybody who's been to bodybuilding shows can see that.
Yeah, no, very, very good point. Actually, a few little questions actually just came up.
Sure, but take advantage, bro. I'm here to help.
So you're obviously, you're the Mr. Olympia MC. You have Arnold Classic MC. You've obviously got friends. You're friends with the judges and stuff like that, or at least a lot of them and stuff. Sure. Because you go to all these shows, so it's natural that if you're not friends with them, then you're just like, oh, okay, it's a business relationship. Which in bodybuilding, that's just not how it is. Now, obviously, people hear your opinions and what goes out, and you talk about potentially how people might do in the future or whatever.
Sure.
And I suppose people make the assumption that this is what the judges are saying behind the scenes or something like that, and you're just portraying that out. So I guess I want to ask you, and I want you to speak to that a little bit. And people are thinking now, and I saw someone say in the comments at some point, I don't know if it's today or yesterday, about that they think Nick Walker's physique is on the way out, and it's all about aesthetics now. And I know obviously it's what's on stage and who's the best, but is there any sort of a lean towards aesthetics? And I suppose speak to, your relationships with judges and what you put out there.
Sure there is. Of course there's a lean towards athletics. There's always been a lean towards, aesthetics, symmetry, proportion, shape. Again, there's a reason that the symmetry round is the very first thing that we do at any bodybuilding show in our federation. I can't speak for others, right? There's a reason at first, because those are the first things. These are the foundations of bodybuilding. All right, if we go all the way back to the Sandow days and what made an ideal physique, right? And I think everybody can universally agree. Wide shoulders, small waist, flaring thighs, not missing any parts, right? Structurally proportioned, all those things, right? The Steve Reeves style physique, right? Beautiful. Everybody can kind of agree on that. That is the base and the core of what bodybuilding is all about at the professional level. Now you're looking for those things. Yes, you do need a certain degree of muscularity because this is professional bodybuilding, but it can't be at the expense of all those things I just said. All right?
Yeah.
We want conditioning, but again, it can't be at the expense of all those other things we just listed. Because you see people ripped to the bone, but they don't have a particularly nice looking physique, right? They sacrifice 5 things to get some lines in their ass. Let me tell you something. That's the single most detrimental thing in bodybuilding that's ever come around.
Yeah, I think Andreas Munzer has destroyed more physiques than anyone, because everyone tries for that.
No question about it. Listen, he made people look soft, right? But if you have to sacrifice fullness, roundness, symmetry, proportion, all that stuff to get ripped, you're not going to be the best bodybuilder on stage. This isn't the most ripped competition. Yeah. It's also not the most massive competition, right? It's the best bodybuilder. Now, whether the judges pick up on that or not, now listen, judges have judged at that level. They have judged thousands of shows, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of athletes, nationals, big time shows like that where there's 800, 1,000 competitors, all the way up to the Mr. Olympia and the big shows. Okay, they know exactly what they're looking for. The phrase I hate the most is the judges are all over the place. They don't know what they're looking for.
Yeah, that annoys
me too. When you say that, okay, and then they'll use this as an example, right? This is perfect. Well, then if that's what they're looking for, then why wasn't Andrew Jack second and Nick third? Right? Why wasn't the other aesthetic guy second place? And because there's a means to an end. Nothing is in absolutes when you're talking about judging a physique. Now, you can make a case for Andrew Jack, But you can also make an equal case for Nick. Is Nick the most aesthetic guy? No. Andrew Jack is probably more aesthetically pleasing than Nick is. I think that's pretty much, kind of common knowledge at this point. Yeah. But there's also, Nick carries a lot of muscle. He also carries a lot of conditioning. He's not put together like a dinosaur, for God's sakes. I mean, listen, the guy's, he may not be as good as some of the other guys, but these are world-class athletes we're talking about. So there's a happy medium there that the judges have to pick. And then it's a preponderance of the scoring. Okay? 3 guys might have had Nick in second. 2 guys might have had him in third. I don't know the scoring, sheets, up to that point. But you can kind of follow where I'm going with this is you have to make a decision on the spot at some point as to who's better, this guy or this guy. And it's not black and white. Bodybuilding is all about shades of gray. Again, there's no absolutes here. So you have to take one thing and put it against the other. Which is worth more, conditioning or shape? Well, listen, Samson had the best shape at the Olympia, but he was soft. And because he was soft, he was 6th. If he was really soft, he would have been 15th, right? And so on and so forth. Nick was better at the Olympia, hard, conditioned, all that stuff, grainy. But, again, lacked when it came to the aesthetics of some of the guys in front of him. So as a judge, it's an incredibly difficult process, but that's why the judges don't know they know exactly what they're looking for, but you don't have, the physiques are all over the place. Some guys are tall, some guys are short. Listen, you got 6'2" Andrew versus 5'6" Nick, or whatever he is, 5'7", right? They're 2 different physiques entirely, but you got to pick one because a guy in the middle doesn't exist there at this show. Now, maybe if Brandon Curry was there, and he was in shape, well, there's a different scenario, right? He's the best of both worlds, so maybe he's in second place. But you can see where this is not as cut and dry as people think with what they're looking for. They know exactly what they're looking for. Sometimes it ain't up there.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of bodybuilding as well, because, if we knew, and there's been talk about, potentially showing the scores after prejudging and things like that, I don't like that idea because it takes a lot of excitement out of it. If someone has straight first, it's like, well, and then you see at finals if that person's clearly not better, then it's like, what the announcement's going to be. It's going to be boring. So I definitely don't like that idea. So, an idea I've sort of had that might, I suppose, appease the fans and appease the the bodybuilding media and all that sort of stuff is maybe having the head judge or maybe 2 of the judges or something like being interviewed after each show and explaining the reasons why the decisions were made, why they were made, because then guys like me can report on it, guys like Nick Strength and Power, Nick Chicerillo.
I got no issue with that. But listen, I would love more transparency when it comes or their opinion. Listen, it's a judge's opinion at the end of the day, and it doesn't even mean. I've talked to many judges. I've talked to Jim himself, Jim Mannion himself, who often says, "Yeah, I had the other guy." This is the president of the federation. Listen, he doesn't get involved much as people think that he's, listen, he's got an opinion like everybody else. But I've had many conversations over the years with Jim where he's like, yeah, personally, I like the guy in second. And I'm like, okay, yeah, so do I, or yeah, I kind of had the other, Listen, again, even him, everybody's got an opinion, and sometimes it doesn't match up, or sometimes it's a 1-point difference. And we've all seen real close shows like that where it's like, well, one guy had 4 1s and the other guy had 3. And vice versa for second places, and by the preponderance of the scoring, this guy ended up in the winner's circle. Now, this also answers the question. Well, I went and talked to all the judges, and every judge I talked to said they had me winning. Well, that's very possible. You might have talked to judges that had you winning. Doesn't mean they're bullshitting you. It means that they're probably being truthful, but their guy didn't win. Again, 1 point the other way, had the other guy winning.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember speaking to someone once, and they said something like, "Oh, I spoke to this judge and they had me winning, but it was straight 1s for the other guy on the scorecard." But I was like, the highs and lows. So I think some of the athletes don't even know exactly as well. So I'm like, there's always a chance that one judge or whatever had you winning, but everyone else didn't.
Again, this is why I take the time to try to explain these things, because what I'm noticing is, and again, the league, I think, would probably help themselves if they were to put some of this stuff out there more often, but that's okay. Listen, I have no problem doing it myself. I've got enough experience.
It gets
I don't mind
anyway.
Explaining the process to people. It's not a hidden thing, okay? Again, there was this is why I kind of have fun with Nick, because Nick's always wrong. He always thinks I'm confused. I'm looking at the score sheet. He'll hold up the score sheet, and you can see right here. And I don't. Somebody explain this. Okay, I'm explaining it to you, Nick. There wasn't 7 judges and 1 high and 1 low taken out. There was 11 and 3 highs and 3 lows. Already your math is way off. You can't figure out bodybuilding with a calculator. At the end of the day, I don't give a shit what it says on that sheet. I don't care how many poses somebody had, or just like the Padilla thing. He had a perfect 300 and still lost because somebody felt like the other guy was better. It's an opinion-based sport. That's what it comes down to, is how many opinions are on the same page that this guy is the best. That's what it comes down to. Again, we don't have required elements. We don't have feats of strength. There's no bench press round, popular, opposed to popular belief. There's no scale on the stage. There's no scale round. Nobody cares what you had to do to get there. I heard some other podcaster making excuses for Nick. Now, he was clearly a Nick fan, and that's cool, but, well, I heard Nick had some digestive issues. He had diarrhea the night before. So you're already making excuses as to why your guy didn't win. I got news for you. Nobody gives a shit about your story, okay? Nobody cares about your journey. That's your journey, your thing. You want to keep that for your people, your family, whatever. When the judges sit down, you don't get to submit a resume. Oh, by the way, here's what I had to go through to get ready for the show here. And then you take, oh, well, shit, I didn't know he had a tough road here. Let's put him in second place. I mean, you walk out there and they're judging what they see. They don't care how you got there, what you had to go through. That's for your girlfriend to, ponder about it. Oh, if they only knew what he had to go through to get it. Who cares?
I have heard that from someone as well. I actually did hear that a partner of someone said something along those lines. Like, you don't know what he went through. It's like, so? What?
Everybody went through something. Everybody on that stage went through something. Trust me, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Half the people up there are not feeling their best because that's not a desirable position to be in. You are sensitive to everything at that point. For all the other people that think the conspiracy, let me guess, he got food poisoning. That's why he looked like shit. Listen, that's not uncommon at that time when you're A, traveling, some people overseas. Yeah. B, you're eating foods that you're not accustomed to eating. 3, you've been eating the same crap for 6 months. Now all of a sudden you got to switch in your diet or whatnot, right? You've got, different time zones and different things. It is not uncommon to either A, get sick, or B, you're dealing with something, your times are off, your bodily, functions are off in those terms. This is not crazy. Anybody who knows bodybuilding, half the lineup is probably not feeling their best at that time. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah. And Urs, he had that, with the Arnold as well. And he was, and he looked fantastic. I was going to ask you as well, Bob, what do you think about Urs versus Ramon? Like, do you think there was a big gap there? Because I've heard people say that Ramon was a clear winner, and I've heard other people say, I thought it was actually pretty close, but Ramon won. What do you think?
It's close. I had Ramon winning, but I'll tell you this, Urs is a very young man. He's only 23, I think, 24.
Yeah.
He's a young man, but actually, if you look at Urs and C-Bum together, they actually look closer than Dino and C-Bum. Urs has a more similar physique. Not to say that it has to be the exact same physique, but I still think he might be a bigger challenge to the title than Ramon. Because, again, he is a young man. He is still growing. He's made incredible progress. Any guy that can do the worm on stage, you got to give some credit to. I mean,
yeah. He's one of the most charismatic guys, and he was telling me that he's from the Olympia, not last year, the year prior, to the next Mr. Olympia. He said, oh, yeah, I had, 40,000 followers or 25,000 followers. And he's like, no, I've got over 500,000. And it's like, wow, like the level of growth in the popularity of these classic guys, because I think their look, and also, Urs is incredibly charismatic as well. So that's one factor. But then you've also got C-Bum. What's he got? 16 million followers. Ramon has multiple millions of followers.
His popularity is crazy. I mean, people just love C-Bum. And listen, you got to give him all the credit in the world. But you know what? Likes is currency to these guys today. They're growing up in a different world than I grew up in. We didn't have social media. We didn't even have the computer, for God's sake. We had magazines. I mean, that's what you had, right? But listen, it's all a popularity contest, but it's also kind of elicited this fan response that I'm not sure I like, where you get people that are attacking you, and I'm sure you get this, having a podcast, right?
Yep.
Now, these are people that don't know anything about anything. They haven't been around longer than 5 years. They don't know anything about the history of the sport. They don't even really know what they're looking at, because once you dice it down, and if you explain it right, then they go, oh, well, I agree with you on that, but Well, okay, yeah, I agree. I see what you're saying there, but and by the time you're done, they agree with everything you've said. It's like, look, not everybody has an eye for bodybuilding. Again, it's like an art. Listen, there's people that look at a Picasso and think that's the most genius thing I've ever seen. I look at it and think my dog Xena could have done that in the backyard. You know what I mean? With some paint on it. What am I looking at here, right?
Yeah.
So it's all in the eye of the beholder, but not everybody has an eye. I know pro bodybuilders, ex-pro bodybuilders, who can't pick a winner to say they have no eye for physiques.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. They're like, oh, I'd have him in fifth. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's going to win.
That's what I'm saying, right? Like, I've done this with my own, these are counterparts of mine. You know what I mean? I'm like, first, like, what are you, insane? Like, this guy needed, like people at the Olympia, right? First call out, they bring out the guys, boom, Rami's all the way on the end. And there was people who actually thought, no, they put him out there because he beat everybody. And I'm thinking to myself, are you blind or stupid? Like, what? He's battling for sixth right now. They're not putting him out there because he just beat everybody up in one series of poses. He doesn't look good right now. This is not the best Rami. No, he's in sixth right now. But there are people that swear that's what was happening. No. I think he just won it. It's like,
I've got to tell you as well. That is some. I mean, it probably did look different in person to the stream as well. But to assess his physique that quickly and make the right call and just chuck him straight on the outside straight away before they've gone through comparison poses there and then not to move into the middle. That was bold in my opinion, but it was the right call. Like Steve Weinberger.
Let me tell you why though. Okay, think of the sequence. First out of the block, symmetry round. Okay, so these guys came out in groups. I called them out in groups. Here's group one. Boom. Let's just say Rami's in there, right? Quarter turn, quarter turn, quarter turn, quarter turn. Okay. Judges have already got a first look at these guys. They've already seen right now, in comparison to themselves, all right, not necessarily really to the guys next to them, but what they're going to be looking at. You can see in 2 seconds who's in shape and who ain't, right? Right off the bat. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. The next thing I did was say, all right, we're going to move to our individual presentations. And the guys came out on their own and did whatever poses they wanted to for probably supposed to be 1 minute. Obviously, we let things go a little bit. For 2 minutes or whatever it is, they had an opportunity to show their physique to its best. Now, again, somebody like Big Rami comes out and he starts hitting shots and poses, and you go, okay, well, I don't know. Well, looks soft from the back. Well, this is weird. Or, well, I've seen him better, right? Whatever. Now they come out. So I get what you're saying, but by this time now, the judges have seen them twice in two different settings, and they've already got,
good point.
If you look down at any judges table, you'll see them marking stuff down as the guys come out. You see them marking. What are they marking down? They're putting people in their potential first call out, second call out, third call out, fourth call out.
Yeah.
All right. I want to see number 1, 5, 6, and 7, I think. And then obviously, listen, there's always room, right? They'll shuffle people around. They'll bring people up and drop them back because some people present themselves when they get out there. You go, you know what? I didn't initially think this guy was all that, but hey, you know what? He's coming alive and he's posing. Let me switch him next to this guy. And that's where all the shuffling takes place is, okay, let me try to get people I want to compare for the first, second, third, fourth, that type of activity. So you could clearly see at that point. If you're a fan of Rami, you could see that this was not the best you've ever seen. All right, there was things going on there that just weren't, showing his physique to its best. Some of these things he's addressed already with having to get stem cell, having to do this, having to whatever the case might be. But listen, that's life. I mean, bodies change, people change, lineups change. Just because people beat people at the Olympia, people think it automatically carries over to the Arnold. Well, I don't understand. Nick just beat these guys at the Olympia. The Olympia was 3 months ago.
Yeah,
3 months ago. Different stage, different set of judges, different set of circumstances, different lighting, and the best thing of all, right? Different physique. Nick didn't bring the same physique to the Arnold that he brought to the Olympia. If he did, arguably he might have won. I still think he'd probably lose it to Samson, but he didn't bring the same physique. Big Rami was improved from the Olympia, but that doesn't mean he was even back to specs. He improved from the Olympia. He was horrible at the Olympia. So, yes, he was better at the Arnold, but still not what you wanted. And Samson improved dramatically from the Olympia. All right? All those things still in place. Obviously, his structure ain't changing in 3 months or whatnot, but he got sharper. he can control his own destiny because he can do something Nick can't. Nick can't get himself taller. He can't get himself more symmetrical or more proportional. But Samson can get himself more conditioning. That's where the difference is with different competitors.
Yeah, and I think that's why now people are so high on Samson going into the Olympia. But one question before we wrap this one up, Bob. I was wondering, the Mr. Olympia, obviously last year, it was the first time in a new venue, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And a few of the critiques of the contest was about the time that it ran. Like I did a live watch party, and it went for over 5 hours for one of the prejudging and finals. I was like, whoa, I'm exhausted now. But is there a way, have you talked to anyone at the Olympia about how they're going to sort of manage that next year going forward? Like, is there going to be sort of set times or anything like that? Because I think that would be an amazing, I suppose, way to improve the contest in a way.
Well, I hear you, and I agree with everything you said. I wasn't particularly a fan of how they had it spaced out. I do have some input on this. I'm trying to actually get more input because I think I can help some of the situation. I'm not a big fan of nighttime prejudgings for a lot of reasons. And this is just
so
my
you
own
agree with
personal...
Lee Priest then? You agree with Lee Priest all one day?
Yeah, right. I know. How about that? Truly, the apocalypse is happening. Next thing you know, the fire and brimstone will be coming down, and dogs and cats will be sleeping together. But here's the thing, right? And again, this is my own input, and I will suggest this, to the people at the Olympia as I'm involved with them. In a best case scenario, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see the prejudging get moved to Saturday afternoon, 12 o'clock, right? Whatever it is. You're going to see physiques that are 25% better just because it's in the afternoon, not at 11 at night, right? Number two, better for the pay-per-view and obviously all the business things. Also, I'd like to have the prejudging and the night show for the men on the same day.
Yeah.
Saturday afternoon prejudging, Saturday night finals. Listen, there's no reason that these guys have to hold conditioning until the next day. That's not what the sport's about. We're looking for the best physique. Okay, so you shouldn't have to jump through hurdles. Now, I will give a brief history lesson there for all the listeners. The prejudging used to be held in the afternoon and all on the same day. I was actually a part of the process that changed it. This is many years ago now. And the reason we changed it was the Friday night finals was taking a beating. Friday night was ladies' night, okay? And it was all the women's stuff, nothing against our ladies, right? But we had a very difficult time selling enough tickets to justify Friday night. Friday night looked like it was half a house at best, okay? So we had to come up with some reason, some rationale to kind of, even it out a little bit where we weren't taking such a bath financially. So we moved the prejudging to Friday night. Now, that clearly helped out with ticket sales. Almost everybody is there for the men's prejudging. That's why it got switched to Friday night. However, that was, 18, 20 years ago, whatever it is now. Times have changed. We have more divisions. We have the advent of the classic physique and things like that. Classic physique, 212 finals could easily hold a house on Friday night now. Easily.
100%.
As long as Bumstead's still in there. Okay, let's just put that out there. But right, if he's there, I got a packed house, right? But I say, and again, this is my own opinion, but we put those things on Friday night and take the men's prejudging and move it back to Saturday. We can sustain Friday with our new classes. Now, we got plenty of them. But those I just mentioned, keep in mind, when we made this change, there wasn't men's physique. There wasn't women's physique. There wasn't wellness. I think the 212 had just started, okay? So a lot of changes have come over the years with that. But that's what I would like to see personally. Now, if logistically we can make that happen, I think it would be a good move. But I would love to see prejudging at 12 noon when these guys are fresh. They don't have a whole day to mess it up. It's very hard to listen. It's I've been there. Okay, I've competed in all settings and times and things. Your body naturally wants to hold water throughout the day, especially for your people coming from overseas and such. Right? You're a whole day's difference here. Talk about messing up your system. But it's very hard to peak at midnight. Okay, when you wake up in the morning, and anybody who's competed knows this, you wake up in the morning, you look your best, right? You get up, you're grabbing your girlfriend, honey, come here, look at this. No, step over here. You got to look from this angle, right? Look in the good light, right? That's when you look your best, is in the morning when you wake up. You haven't had time to mess it up.
Yeah.
So I say, 12 noon, these guys wake up, they're ready to go. You're going to basically get one meal in you, and then boom, you're going to hit the prejudging. And like I said, you want to see your best physiques? I say they're 20-25% better if we can move that to the afternoon.
Yeah, I like it. Another idea I had as well, because one thing that happened at the Olympia this past year, just gone, was the classic physique guys. They only did top 5 for the posing routines, and we actually missed out on Terence Ruffin posing, and that for me was like a huge shame, whether they do a top 10 or whatever. But I feel like there's enough room and enough popularity with the classic to be able to facilitate that. But there was 60 odd guys or 60 something, whatever it was.
Listen, we had over 400 competitors.
Ridiculous,
so yeah, I mean, and listen, that's ridiculous. Don't get me wrong. I've been advocating for a cut round for years, but that aside, the reason we ended up with so many is, you got to remember, going back to last year, we had an extra 3 months on board because the Olympia was in December. So there was an extra 3 months of shows, qualifications, the point system was still in place, all that. So we ended up with this shitload of people that now you got to try to logistically try to figure out how to get across stage, how to give them their time, not to mention the expenses involved and all that stuff. But yeah, Terence Ruffin's the best poser in the world right now, in any bodybuilding division. So I'm with you on that one, but it's also a business, right? You got to figure out, listen, we were already there until God knows what time, and we would have only been there longer. But again, if we could sort out some of these things and our own logistics of the weekend, then maybe that's something where you can see a top 10 or such, but it's difficult, man. I mean, we've got 10 divisions now. So
yeah, I think with some of the, like you said, a cut round would be a good idea for some of maybe the women's divisions, and at prejudging maybe have it where everyone competes, but at finals it's cut down to a certain amount, because I think even at finals for bikini and these other divisions, there's a walkout for every girl. It's going for so long.
No, not anymore. We only did top 10, I believe, for the bikini, but we used to do that, and I hated that because we had 60 girls one year, and I had to come out. They come out in a big line, and I had to rifle down the line. Please, they put a hand up and they walk off stage. And I'm thinking, listen, I was there, okay? I mean, if you don't make it, you don't make it. I'd rather be out eating pizza at that point or watching the show than go up there. And especially for the girls, right? Think about this. They got to go get their hair done, their makeup done, their tan done. They spend a lot of money to go out there for 1.2 seconds and do this and walk off the stage.
Yeah, it's tough.
Nah. So listen, if you either make it or you don't. This ain't 4th grade t-ball where everybody gets a swing at the ball, sitting on top of the cone. Okay, this is for the Olympia. This is the best of the best. That's who should go on the final stage. Like I say, I'm all for a cut round. Hopefully, that's something we can look at in the next few years.
Yeah, and something with that as well is I totally agree with you. Completely agree. The only, I suppose, counter argument to that is, like, just say there's a pro bodybuilder in Australia. Like, I've got a friend who lives in Queensland. Just say he missed out on the top 5, top 10. He's traveled over there, flown his family over there, whatever, for this experience. I know it's sort of bad luck, but I would love to see maybe the competitors that don't make the finals, for there to be some sort of a showcase, maybe in the expo or something like that, where they have maybe posing awards or something in some sort of, even if it's a stage and it's set up where the booths are, like right in the middle. Oh, that probably wouldn't work with the crowd watching, but some sort of setup where these guys can still do their posing routines, and then people at the expo get a little bit more of the pro bodybuilders, I guess.
I mean, listen, anything's possible. I mean, like you say, I mean, yes, it's a sport, it's a business. We all get that, but you also, you want to give people their due and recognize that they did get there, and whether now. Listen, every sport does this. Every sport except us has a cut round, whether it's tennis, golf, wrestling, whatever, right? Quarterfinals, semifinals, right? Track and field, Olympics, right? There's 8 lanes on the TV when you're watching Usain Bolt run, right? 8, not 58. Not everybody gets a chance, right? You got to make it to that point. So I get all sides, but listen, anything's possible. I mean, you can always expand. You can always make it a pleasurable experience for everybody. And let's face it, it is the best of the best. You want to get on that Joe Weider final stage, get better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, well, I totally agree with that, because I feel like sometimes we are a little too sensitive with this whole thing. But yeah, like you mentioned, it is a hard balance. And the Olympia, I think everyone goes, oh, why don't the Olympia just do this? And I sort of sometimes say similar things, but it's because they have so much that they're juggling, and it's very easy to judge things in hindsight. instead of, you know,
No, they're
actually having to plan
people have no idea how many moving pieces there are to something like this. And we have an event that encompasses, you know, now 5-6 days. There's not a lot of events that encompass that kind of time when you think about it. You're going to go to a boxing match, right? Boxing match is one night. They set up the ring the night before. Boom. They sell the ticket, right? You're there for the big fight. Those ring guys, you know, by the time you get out of there, they got that thing halfway in the truck already. They're in and out. We have an event that encompasses many, many days between the amateur check-ins, this, that, right? Prejudging, finals 2 nights, Sunday seminar, and all that kind of thing. It's difficult to find a place that can house all this stuff. You know, people I hear arguments all, you know, wow, why don't they just have it here? Why don't they just have it? Why can't they find a different place? Listen, because it's hard to find a place that, and then you gotta fight everybody else who's looking for space. We're not the only show in town. You got to fight whatever season it is, whether it's baseball or, you know, there's wrestling going on, or there's boxing or MMA, or everybody's got you know, looking to rent out the facilities. It's hard to get dates that correspond. Everything, you know, there's 10 things that have to come together at once to make it work and make it feasible. So it's not an easy task. Trust me, people.
I heard the other day that the MGM's booked out for years now. Apparently,
it's very conceivable because, again, any type of theater type setup in particular, anything goes to a theater. Singing, concerts, magicians. I mean, you know, you go down the line, right? So they're all looking for these same type of places. So that pushes us to have either a bigger facility, have it split, because we got an expo, don't forget, you know, that we got to, you know, try to work in there. Personally, I like the arena format. I mean, as much shit as we'd always get for the Orleans, the arena was great. I mean, listen, they have concerts there. It's the same seating arrangement, right? You have a stage at one end, and then you got everybody in a, you know, position. You got the big screens up. There's plenty of room for the athletes and everything that you got to do. That's something I hope we can look at for future reference also, because, you know, but arenas are, again, they're tough too. There's arena football, there's soccer things, there's concerts. Again, there's, WWE's in a different city every week. And now you've got other, you know, wrestling formats like AEW and these type of things. And again, UFC, I mean, you know, they're all looking at arenas. So it's hard. Trust me, people, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of things going on there.
Yeah, someone said I have no balls in the comments. I don't know what that means, but
you got. Are you supposed to be asking tougher? Go ahead. What do you got? Throw something out.
I feel like I asked some good questions. I don't know. I feel like I asked some good ones, but yeah. Anyway,
no, what they want you to do is they want you to be an asshole to me, right? They want you to disagree or think I'm full of shit or, you know, whatever, right? But they want you to get into the conspiracy stuff. They want you to, ask why this or why that, or, you know, it's like, but there isn't any conspiracies. I just put this out in my Voice of Bodybuilding podcast that was out today. And I go through how ludicrous some of these things are over the years. And as I've said before, if this is the best the Federation can do, is this the stuff they set up? Because these are the most clueless mofos I've ever met in my lifetime. This is good for business. Having a guy win 8 Olympias in a row is good for business. Are you kidding me? Like who's writing this stuff? Then I want to meet that guy. Listen,
because people start to lose interest and think, it's a one man show, and that's why I don't get it. They're like, it's rigged for that, and I'm like, wouldn't it make more business sense?
Rigged. Who's it rigged for?
Yeah,
like who made any more money on this Arnold? If Samson won versus Nick versus Jack versus anybody in that lineup, right? How does the Federation make any? Like, what horse do they have in the race?
I think, if anything, it would be the 3 guys behind, or the 4 guys actually behind Samson, if they'd won, because obviously Sean Clarita, big Rami making a comeback. He's so huge in Egypt. You've obviously got Andrew Jack, who has a good amount of popularity, and then Nick Walker, who has a huge amount of popularity. They would make more sense for any of those to win.
And the funny thing is, they're popular because they're the best bodybuilders in the world. Of course they're popular. Yeah. But, you know, how often you have a guy that literally comes out of nowhere that nobody saw coming you're going to see him coming because they had to get there, right? You had to get a pro card first, right? Like Phil Heath, right, years ago. Kid won the Junior Nationals. Okay, you see him coming a mile away, right? Then he won the USA. Then he stepped into the pros, and you went, man, he's probably a future Olympia. You could see it. You know, I don't care how much of a novice you were in the bodybuilding world, right? And then he went on to win 7 Olympias. I mean, of course you see him coming, but nobody just shows up out of the blue when you're going to be part of a federation and stuff like that. You know, of course, listen to T-Bum, the most popular bodybuilder on the planet. Well, listen, Chris paid his dues. He got in there. He improved, and boom, all of a sudden he's in the winner's circle. People got to remember, it wasn't that long ago he was losing to Breon Ansley.
Yeah, exactly. So
champions are made, right? I mean, but, you see it unfold. But to think that there's some arbitrary idea of picking a champ, like we have some idea of who's going to show up in shape, on any given day. Listen, are there people you'd like to see win? Sure. But that doesn't always pan out. Listen, I would have loved to have seen Phil Heath, tie the record, but he lost to Roden. Now, whether you agree or disagree, it's like, I don't know. I mean, you think there was some, powers that be that kept him from doing that? Or like they're, if that's the case, why did he let Ronnie Coleman tie Lee Haney's record? I mean, listen, it happens as it happens, folks. I can guarantee you, there is no greater thing going on behind the scenes. And again, who would it benefit if there was?
Yeah, exactly. No, very, very good point. And it's, you'd have more argument for it in another division, but open pro bodybuilding, it's much harder to argue because it's so rare. Like, yeah, someone might edge someone else out and you might disagree, but it's very rare that it's like, oh, the guy that should have been in 7th placed first. Like,
that's a great valid argument, right? I mean, listen, you can make a case for, this guy, or this guy should have been 3rd instead of 4th. Listen, those are all valid arguments. Everybody's kind of got their say. And some of the judges might even have it that way. But you're spot on. How many times you see a guy in 8th or 9th and people say, oh, he got screwed.
Yeah.
This guy should have won. It's like,
really?
No, he shouldn't have won. Come on. I mean, you think the judges you honestly think they're off by that much? They just didn't, they didn't see him?
Yeah,
exactly. Come on, man. I mean, there's usually a good reason why somebody loses the show, especially if you're that far off. I mean, and let me tell you something. If you're out there watching this right now, please do us all a favor, okay? There's a reason that we always say you have to be there in person, okay? And I know a lot of people like to laugh at, I guess you had to be there in person. Yes. What do you think? Let me tell you something. The show that the judges are watching from 15 feet away, 20 feet away, is a whole different show than what you're watching on TV or on your computer or on your little camera screen, okay? It's 2 different worlds. Let me tell you something. It's 2 different worlds, whether you're at the judges' table or sitting in the cheap seats in the back. Even that is or whether you're watching on the big screens, right? You watch on the big screen and then you go walk up towards the stage and you go, oh, wait a minute here. You can't really see that detail on the big screen. Well, of course you can't. But this is some of the reason that I do believe that a lot of the fans out there get outraged because they're watching at home, even if they can get it on their TV. You hook up and you can watch it on the pay-per-view or whatever. That's only going to give you so much of a look, okay? It's good, but trust me, people, you're not seeing the show. I'm seeing it better than the judges. I'm actually closer than the judges are.
Yeah, you can see all the details and everything close.
Oh, listen, the condition these guys are in is unbelievable. I crack up sometimes because, again, I'm closer. I can see all the detail. And then I'll see, like, none of these guys were in shape. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you, insane? Like, what if you can see what I'm seeing, okay? Trust me, they're in shape. Maybe from your perspective it's not, but it's all about perspective. And you got to keep that in mind when all the experts are saying the same thing. And you're not hearing a lot different. I mean, out of everybody I consider an expert, there's a lot of goofs out there, but anybody I consider an expert, not one person has really gone against what the judging was. I haven't heard one expert that had Nick winning. Not one.
Yeah, I would say to me that it was almost spot on. I would say it's spot on. Like, there's nothing that I disagree with. Had I'd seen maybe Rami next to Nick more, maybe I'd say, Rami's overwhelming size, potentially, but I don't disagree at all. And it was, I mentioned at the start of this video, it was almost a nightmare lineup for Nick Walker because he was up against tall guys and they all had big round quads, which I think more accentuated his sort of quads being maybe a little bit more flat. But when I look at the comparison videos, there's not much difference in his quads, but it was just pointed out by the lineup pretty much.
Well, and that's what the game's all about, right? It's all about comparison, like we just talked about. When those guys got next to Nick, it exposed his weaknesses and emphasized their strengths. And the opposite can be said. At the Olympia, this was a great lineup for Nick Walker because he came in condition. He was freaky and all that stuff, and he exposed it the opposite way. He exposed Samson for not being in condition enough. he automatically made him look soft, right?
Yeah,
But
Brandon
he had a
Curry
great
too.
lineup because look at who Nick's competing against. He's competing against Hadi Chupan, same size, same muscularity, same everything, right? He's competing against Derek Lunsford, similar size, better structure, but again, needs a little bit of muscle maturity, that type of thing. You're looking at a Brandon Curry. Again, these are all people height-wise, okay, that stacked up very well with Nick. This was a great lineup for Nick, and he did very well with it. Good for him. He deserved every bit of it. But your assessment is dead on the money here. That's going to change dramatically with a Samson, a Jack, again, some of these other guys that are coming into play that are going to expose his weaknesses. And I think Flex Wheeler and some of the other guys, even Milos mentioned this just the other night also. When you're standing, it's a straight-up comparison. And it's every single pose in its entirety. It's not the side tricep when you're hitting the side tricep pose. It's the entire physique. How does it look? How does it compare? Again, overall, taking all the things into account, who do you like better? And that's really just what it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Bob, thank you so much for coming on. I think I was going to wrap this up about 3 different times because these videos normally go for about 20 minutes, but we did an hour and 20, but I think people enjoyed it. We had a good amount of viewers during the live stream as well, and thanks to everyone who got involved in the comments as well. So go check out Bob's channel, which is Voice of Bodybuilding, as you can see in the background with Bob Cicherillo, and also check you out as well on Olympia TV and all the other stuff you're on as well. But thank you so much, Bob, for coming on Desktop Bodybuilding for the first time, and I'm sure I'm going to have you on again because I felt like I still have more stuff that we could go on for probably hours.
Compile a list, brother, and I'll be happy to come back anytime.
Beautiful, love it. Thank you so much, Bob Cicherillo. So for myself, Xavier Wills, Bob Cicherillo, this is Desktop Bodybuilding for Bodybuilding News Daily Live. We are out.